Great. So the webinar is now being recorded, and let's get started. So here is a brief agenda for today's webinar. I will start with an introduction from myself, Tulsi Byrne at the UN Global Compact. We will then move to a overview of setting the context by UN Women, Ravi Caracara. And then we will move to the opportunity for partnerships in this space from Plan International. Finally, we will close with some wonderful company examples from Lisa at Accenture, as well as Tamika from Mercedes-Benz. And then we will have an opportunity for participants in the audience to ask some questions, provide some comments. Before we get started with the meat of the webinar, I'd like to go over some logistics. As I mentioned, we will wait for questions until the end so that we can allow all speakers to provide their content. But at the end of the webinar, here are two ways that you can ask a question. One is by typing a question in the question panel there, and I will review the question and direct it to the panelists, or you can raise your hand with the little hand function, and I will call on you to give your question verbally. If we have an inundation of questions, I will ask you to put it through the question pane so that we can make sure that all questions are very focused. All right, just a brief introduction of the UN Global Compact. I'm sure most of you are familiar with our work, but for the others on the line that are not familiar, the UN Global Compact was established in July 2000 as the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. Our mandate comes from the General Assembly, and it is to promote responsible business practices and UN values, including the most recently adopted SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. It is a call to business everywhere to align their operations and strategies with 10 universally accepted principles in the areas of human rights, labor, anti-corruption, and environment, and to take action in support of UN goals. The UN Global Compact defines corporate sustainability as a company's creation of long-term value in financial, social, environmental, and ethical terms. The Global Compact currently has over 13,000 signatories, including over 9,000 companies, which comprise of small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as many multinationals. It also includes local networks in over 85 countries. These local networks play a critical role by working with participants and other actors, including NGOs, governments, academia, to advance the work of the initiative at the local level. As many of you know, in September 2015, the SDGs were adopted by all 193 UN member states, which was in itself an incredible milestone. As you can see, they cover a range of topics from climate to water, decent work, to gender equality, to the elimination of poverty, to reducing inequalities. In this context, the UN Global Compact has two dimensions. One, it encourages businesses to act responsibly. Businesses should do no harm as the baseline minimum standard, comply with national and international laws and standards in all areas to earn their social license to operate, as well as to upload the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. In addition, we think the SDGs provide a tremendous opportunity to make positive contributions, which may include identifying the most significant and strategic SDGs for businesses to set goals towards and contribute to larger sustainable development goals. It is very important to reiterate here, as the UN Global Compact that always has made efforts to find opportunities, but it should serve as a complement, not a substitute, for business acting responsibly. You will hear much more on the facts and figures of today's topic, but in advance of the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Global Compact surveyed its participants, which ranked education and jobs as one of the most urgent areas for sustainable development that they could contribute to. 42% of business leaders considered youth employment as today's most pressing global risk, but also saw that this was the greatest business potential. In order to achieve the range of targets under the 17 SDGs, it will require all actors to come together to create inclusive societies with specific actions and investments for young women and girls. A brief overview of the UN Global Compact's work on youth and gender equality. The UN Global Compact recognizes that there is a strong business case for driving decent jobs for young women and men by engaging directly with companies to promote youth employment, skill development, education and training methods, which will then increase the pool of appropriate skilled candidates. Business has the opportunity to also shift the paradigm for women's formal labor force participation by unleashing the full potential of young women through investment, innovation, mentorship, and training. Our work on youth specifically looks at some key areas that we think could be super powerful in making progress. We look at work-based training, which gives young people the hands-on experience they need to find future employment. Addressing the skill gap, which often exists between the education and skills youth acquire and what is needed in the workforce. And entrepreneurship and inspiring young entrepreneurs. The pace of change in the working world is requiring workers to think more creatively, to transition quickly into new positions and industries or become self-employed. Successful entrepreneurial ventures create more jobs, and more companies are seeing the benefits of investing in young female and male entrepreneurs. In regards to our work on gender, it is really grounded in an initiative called the Women's Empowerment Principles, which is a joint initiative with UN Women that provides a holistic approach to gender equality and business, and it has a spectrum of ways to maximize positive impacts for young women and girls in the workplace, marketplace, and community. It also seeks to elaborate the gender dimension of other areas of corporate sustainability. And this is where the webinar today comes into play, with looking at the youth unemployment crisis and how this impacts women. So now I would like to turn it over to Ravi Caracara, who is the Senior Advisor of Strategy, Partnership, and Advocacy to the Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. Ravi, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tulsi.
Great.
So thank you very much, everybody, for joining such an important and a timely seminar, and really hope that we can all come together to change the situation of unemployment of young women. But just to reiterate the context, as we know that we are sitting with one of the biggest youth bulge. We have 1.8 billion young women and young men in the world, and close to half of them are young women. And I think it has been said again and again in the Agenda 2030, as well as a carry forward from the MDGs, that we need to look at investing in innovation, creating job solutions to really look at this emerging demand for jobs in the fourth industrial revolution. It's anticipated by 2030 470 million jobs are needed for new workers. UN system has been working on issues of unemployment of young people for decades. And I think time and again we have come together to reiterate the importance of looking at a gender perspective to youth unemployment. Just to give you an example of a recently conducted and concluded survey, which is the My World survey, which I was part of, that's why probably I'm hesitating, is to really see that across the world 193 people, young people from 193 countries participated. 7 million of them were young women and young men. By far the #1 vote after education was job opportunities. But if you started analyzing the survey and looking from a qualitative perspective, what we saw also emergence of, especially by young women, was opportunities that are linked to skills that contribute to entrepreneurship. So we've been hearing very strongly this whole dimension on looking at secondary education being reformed, skills that are developed to really answer this kind of an imbalance of market demand and young people, and especially young women, filling that. The global unemployment rate is on the rise, as all of us know, and the historic peak was 13.2% in 2013. It is supposed to also go up in the coming years, especially with looking at tech revolution, etc., etc. And I personally want to highlight the importance of this seminar, which is to really look at in the larger context of youth unemployment, bringing and magnifying the focus on young women's unemployment. So if I can have the next slide, please. I think we've said very clearly, that young women have to be part of the 1.8 billion. But the irony is that unfortunately, due to femicide, we don't have the same number of young women and young men. That exactly is a testimony of the larger inequalities in the world. But having said that, we have this huge opportunity of resources of young women who largely are affected more by unemployment. Just to say that, unemployment among young women exceeds that of young men by 20%. In some regions, it can be 30%. And if you want to look at more statistics, we invite you to look at the recently published ILO youth employment statistics. But we have the opportunity with this generation of young women to change that. We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. We're looking at more investment in young women's skills development, the leadership development, entrepreneurship development, looking at investment in STEM, STEAM, and innovation. So let me highlight some of the areas which UN Women particularly is working on. If I can have the next slide. So as part of the Agenda 2030 and with our pledge to really look at engendering the implementation of Agenda 2030, UN Women launched last year on March 11th on the Youth CSW, a youth and gender equality strategy calling for a LEAPS framework for gender equality, calling for investment and leadership of young women, economic empowerment and skills development, particularly highlighting the work on secondary and post-secondary education that can develop both soft and specialized skills that lead to not only employment creation, but also, as many young women say, that we're just not going to seek employment, we're going to create employment. And that's been the heart of the E of the LEAPS framework. But also reality to take action to end all forms of violence against young women and girls. Tulsi highlighted the webs, which we really encourage all of you to read, but to ensure that the ecosystem and the environment is safe and secure, including the public transportation system, the school system, the university systems, so that young women can exercise their fundamental economic rights and be there just not seeking employment, but also creating employments. We also look at really supporting participation of young women across the board, working with young men in gender equality, but also intergenerational dialogue. And I will talk about the launch of our global coalition in a little time. But we know from research, we know very clearly that if we look at women's economic empowerment and the recent conclusion from Davos and various studies that are coming out, that we can actually increase the GDP by as much as $1.5 trillion. And that is the opportunity that we have if we really take on this piece of investing in skills of young women linked to employment and entrepreneurship. Can I have the next slide, please, Tulsi? So what have we done in UN Women? As part of our youth strategy on the International Youth Skills Day, which was celebrated for the second time last year, and I had the honor to work with the government of Sri Lanka to really secure this day, is to really we launched a global coalition of young women entrepreneurs for skills and innovation. Now, what is this doing? It is really looking at creating a convening power, bringing young women entrepreneurs and supporters of entrepreneurship and skills development so that we create the critical mass and take conversations that we are having right now to scale. So on March 13th, we invite all of you to join our coalition gathering at UN Women headquarters to bring together 100 young women innovators and thinkers and supporters to take on this conversation forward. I'll give you one particular example. We signed an MOU with the Mughal last week and offered 10,000 free scholarship to young women entrepreneurs, especially in the global south, so that they have these free learning opportunities and assets to their, and they can avail that, including mentorship through young women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs that are available through the huge WEPS network and through many other networks such as Mughal and beyond. We know very clearly that sub-Saharan Africa is definitely an important survey. We know there is a growing generation of young women entrepreneurs across the continent. I know very dear friends working on STEM and STEAM, looking at technology and embracing that and taking it to a scale. One example would be some of the work done by my dear friend Mariam in Senegal, where she's been working with girls who drop out of school, teaching them how to code, and she's started a revolution called I'm a Code. And I'm happy to do bilaterals and answer some of the questions. So if we see this emergence of this young women, workers, young women who are investing in interesting skills development and responding to market demand. But also an unfortunate reality where only few of us are talking about this. I think this needs to be brought forward in the larger conversation in employment, but also engendering of the youth in employment conversation. So that's why this seminar is so pertinent and so critical. So if I can have the next slide, please. Of course, for us, UN Women looks at economic empowerment as a critical area. As you know, there is a conversation that is taking place, the high-level panel on women's economic empowerment, and there would be, a flagship initiative that we are putting together. So we have interesting dimensions. I invite you to, write to me, connect with us so that we can take this to scale. UN Women is also part of the UN Decent Jobs Initiative, an initiative that was started by the former Secretary General, really calling the UN entities to come together and to embrace and find innovative solutions to youth unemployment. And that again, for us as UN Women, we want to see a very strong gender dimension and gender implementation and impact, because we have many youth employment initiatives which are often gender blind, and young women often fall through the crack. So for us, the last I would like to emphasize is the empowerwomen.org, which I invite all of you to go to, is a very important portal and a flagship initiative of UN Women, which will soon in March, we will be launching a virtual skill schools for women, and particularly a large number of women that come to our virtual skill school, and now as part of the empowerwomen.org are young women. So really thank you very much, and I'm very eager to learn from other panelists and many of you who've been joining us, and really hope that this conversation of the webinar is just not a webinar, it's a movement to create employment for young women, but also create employment with them as entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi, for these wonderful slides and background information, as well as connecting it to the larger UN agenda around the Sustainable Development Goals. And you're right, it's not just about finding opportunity for young women, but it's really creating it with them to make sure that they're agents of change in this movement. So we now turn to Dolores. Dolores is from Plan International. She is the Senior Advisor for Economic Security, Global Influence, and Partnership. So, Dolores, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tulsi, and hello, everybody across the world. It's really an honor to speak on this topic and to be part of this panel. Ravi, I want to thank you also for providing a very comprehensive overview of the context and the challenge that we are all working on in terms of the issues of youth employment. I just want to build on that a little bit, and Ravi, if you could, Tulsi, if you could go to the next slide, please. The next one, please. We've been working in Plan International and youth employment for a number of years, and I think, as Ravi mentioned, this work, as good as it's been, has been pretty much gender blind. So it's been very encouraging this last year to see the strong emphasis and the gender lens that's been brought into this work. The numbers that Ravi talked about in terms of unemployment really also do not quite capture the full picture. And so I want to talk a little bit about why we in Plan International believe that partnerships are critical. And that is in part because of the scale of this challenge that we're facing. The numbers on youth employment and unemployment don't capture the full picture in that there's still 620 million young people who are not caught up into those statistics. They're not captured. They're not in school. They're not in education or training. And the ILO has really warned that this is at risk of a lost generation, and including in that group of more than 620 million, young women are disproportionately represented. So I want to flag that for us, and I also want to flag the massive number of young women who are working but they're not paid. It is unpaid work. And there is a challenge as we go forward to be able to bring them into the formal economy and the mainstream. And the final point on scale is that with this recent attention on migration, youth are on the move. And the UN Habitat has estimated that 35% of the 14 million refugees are youth. So the scale of the challenge is tremendous. The second point I want to mention is that it's not a simple solution that we're talking about. This is a very complex issue. A lot of attention has been paid to the area of workforce development and training and building capacity of young people, but it is a broader challenge that we're facing in that it's a combination of both supply and demand. Job creation and creating the conditions for economic development is a major part of this challenge, as well as preparing these young people for the workforce. The other aspect in terms of thinking about economic empowerment for young women, there isn't one common definition that's generally applied across the world on this, but I think there's general consensus that it requires economic empowerment as a combination of having the capacity and the ability to succeed, as well as opportunities to apply that capacity, but also in terms of young women, it's really important that we build and make opportunity for the power for them to make their own decisions and to act on their own decisions and to control the assets that they acquire. So that takes us to this other, part of the complexity, and that is that there are many legal barriers, there's discrimination, there's cultural behaviors and attitudes that are preventing many of these young women from joining the workforce. So as we go forward, it's not a straight and simple response. The other point is that it is a changing environment. The workforce, some analysts are forecasting that 80% of the jobs in the future don't even exist today. So when we are trying to prepare young people for this workforce, it really is a challenge, and this is why we very much need the private sector to be involved, to know exactly what those jobs are going to look like and what skills that they need to be prepared with. We do know that small and micro enterprise development will make a high percentage of these jobs, in addition to what the formal jobs being created by the private sector. And the last point on here is this lacking information about what works. There have been a number of studies around what the investments so far in this issue of youth employment, and one of the fairly consistent conclusions is that while we do have some information and we do know certain things that work, there is a massive information gap about how to proceed to create these opportunities, and definitely there is a need to have more gender disaggregated data and information about what works for young women. So if you go to the next slide, please. It all sounds quite daunting, I'm sure, as Ravi and I both talk about the scale and the complexity of this, but it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, these young women that are ready, willing, and able, these are intelligent, strong, creative, and highly motivated young women. So the opportunity that we have is to harness their potential and allow them, open the doors and give them access into the workforce. And the private sector, we think, is a key to supporting that and helping make that happen. Some of the things that we have identified, I won't talk about all of them because some are already well known. That is to invest in the education and the vocational training and addressing the skills gap. I think our next two panelists are going to talk more about that. Definitely creating employment opportunities, and I would encourage, in thinking in terms of the private sector, internships and apprenticeships are a great way to open the door to young women for employment, and mentoring once they are in jobs and apprenticeships and internships is really important. But there are other ways as well, and I think this is where the challenge is for us to expand our work, and that is to move into the area and the arena of public policy and public investment, and that the private sector can have an influence on promoting economic and investment policies that work for young women, and critically can have a strong role in playing to eliminate discrimination and remove barriers, changing how the workplace works. We also want to, in Plan International, we look at a life cycle approach, and our experience has shown that it's really this movement into economic empowerment really can start at a young age for young girls and women, and we think that it's more than a job. It really is about a quality of life. So supporting equality through investing in education, quality health care is a part of the bigger strategy. Removing the legal barriers that women have to access to assets, inheritance laws that prevent them from owning land, and opening up doors to access to finance is critical. We also, there was a mention earlier about small and micro enterprises. These enterprises need to be part of supply chains, value chains, and the entrepreneurs need access to finance. This is one of the current barriers that needs to be overcome. We need to bring the financial community into work on this area. And the last point is innovation. This is where we need the private sector. We think Plan International believes fairly strongly that this situation really calls for innovative partnerships and opportunities that can result in transformation on scale. It's really important to always be thinking about scale. The next slide. Our work in this area, we've been working through partnerships for a number of years, and what we have found is that the way to approach this is through shared value. There's a key opportunity for private sector and the social sector to work together with governments and young people themselves to work on this issue where it's a win-win situation. You know, companies, as I think Tulsi mentioned at the beginning, companies want to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's an important part of their business agenda, but they also know it's a part of their business strategy, because social development promotes stable societies, which is critical to economic development. And investing in these young women is investing in the future workforce. So there's a lot of room for creating shared value partnerships. If you go to the next slide. We have I have a very few examples to just briefly touch on, but not go into much detail. 3 examples of companies that Plan International has worked with to promote economic opportunities for young women. The Barclays Bank, and many of you maybe have heard of their Banking on Change initiative, where they work with more than one international NGO. They also work with CARE to provide access to financial services and entrepreneurship training for young women. And this has been a very successful initiative across Africa. We plan to work with Credit Suisse on an initiative to provide financial education to 100,000 adolescent girls in 4 countries, Brazil, China, India, and Rwanda. That's also a very exciting global partnership for us. One of our very important partners is Accenture. And we've worked with Accenture in a number of ways. They've supported this initiative. But through their Skills to Succeed, they have invested in scaling up opportunities in programs that we've operated in India and Indonesia and El Salvador and other countries, building on our comprehensive YEE programs, or Youth Economic Empowerment programs. They can bring it to scale. So there's very quick examples that more information could be provided later if members want. The next slide, please. I do want to share an example in the next slide where we, in our work with partnerships and our partners, it's now evolving to the next level of creating partnerships through multiple levels. What was mentioned earlier about the many things we don't know, there are some things that we do know, and what we have learned is that a comprehensive approach really can be more effective than a single approach to youth economic empowerment, and particularly for young women. And this example in Uganda, we've been able to actually build an ecosystem of partnerships. This program combines, it leverages on savings groups, it offers training, it's organizing cooperatives, and it's supporting the establishment of small and micro enterprises and linking them to value chains. But this requires several different partners. So this level of partnership creates an ecosystem, as you'll see from this graphic. There's partners who are bringing in technical support, bringing in funding, bringing in training, linking to the value chains. And this involves local partners at the national level and partners, including the government, which is a key partner here, and international level supporters as well. So we think this is has worked very well in Uganda. It's reached 12,000 young people. We've learned a lot about the shared value partnership relationships and understanding the market. And this is the next step in this is going to scale up in 4 countries in East Africa to reach 100,000 young people. So if you go to the next slide, which is the last one, this is an important piece of the puzzle as well, we think. Plan International, Accenture, World Bank, and the ILO, and some other organizations are co-founders of the Solutions for Youth Employment. And the Solutions for Youth Employment is a global coalition of public and private sector partners and civil society committed to building evidence about what works in the area of youth employment and creating synergy to expand opportunities for young people. A major part of this effort is to maintain a global knowledge platform base. So it's important that lessons learned at the national level are linked into the global knowledge platform, so everyone benefits from that. So our programs and plan and our partner Accenture and so forth will feed into this global platform. And also just to mention, Ravi, you mentioned the new UN global initiative called Decent Jobs for Youth, which is another very exciting global initiative. And S4YE and Decent Jobs for Youth will be aligned. The ILO is one of the key partners in S4YE. So I'll just wrap it up there and say my last slide is We Plan International believes very strongly, if you go to the next slide, Tulsi, in investing in young women and doing that through partnerships. So we call on corporates and private sector to join us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your extremely interesting information there, especially I think you hit it right on the head there with having a holistic approach. It's not just about creating the job, but it's enabling the environment so that women can take advantage of these opportunities. And we actually have some questions coming in that speak to this, but I will wait till the Q&A portion to turn to those. So thanks so much. Now I'm excited to turn to the company examples portion of our webinar, and we will begin with Lisa, who's the Managing Director of Global Corporate Citizenship Programs at Accenture. And Lisa, I will let you take it away from there. Lisa?
Yes, thank you very much. Hi everyone, thank you for inviting Accenture to join this powerhouse group, and to Dolores for your kind words about Accenture and our Skills to Succeed partnership. I will tackle this big topic on creating opportunities for young women from 3 angles. First, looking at findings from our research on cracking the gender code that has fueled our dual commitments to nurturing women in our own workforce at Accenture and through our community investments, as Dolores described. Before I dive in, let me start by quickly introducing Accenture and myself. With over 394,000 people at Accenture serving clients in 120 countries, we are a leading global professional services company that provides a broad range of services and solutions in strategy, consulting, digital, technology, and operations. We were proud to be named in 2016 on the Fortune magazine's Change the World list, alongside 49 other companies who are tackling major societal problems as part of their core business. Our innovation, highlighted by Fortune, was a partnership with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to deploy biometrics work previously used at Heathrow Airport, to identify refugees in camps in order to reduce fraud and abuse in the distribution of benefits and resettlement procedures. As for my story, I'm a managing director leading a global team and network at Accenture that shapes and develops our corporate citizenship programs in the areas of environmental sustainability, community investment, around Skills to Succeed, and non-financial reporting. And I've been with Accenture since college, which makes me a lifer and a bit of a dinosaur in this day and age, that joined the corporate citizenship team 8 years ago after 10 years in strategy consulting, where I split my time between consulting and leading social entrepreneurship innovation initiatives for the company. Okay, so on to the main points here. To set the scene, let's look at what some recent Accenture research says about the gender dimension of an aspect of youth employment and why it's so important to have more girls in STEM. So first of all, the good news. Our research shows that globally we are seeing increasing levels of women reaching higher levels of education internationally. However, this fall we launched a new research program with Girls Who Code that was called Cracking the Gender Code. And the headline was that in the US specifically, the pipeline of young women pursuing technology fields is actually shrinking. In the US, we see a negative trend line for women and girls picking STEM majors, graduating with STEM degrees, and working in STEM jobs. There are a number of issues that this raises. First of all, the percentage of women in the US tech workforce is projected to shrink from 24% to 22% in the next 10 years unless we take action now. And not only is this gender gap bad for those women and girls whose earning potential will be lower, but it also causes a skill shortage that is damaging to the economy as Ravi was describing, the GDP opportunity that's lost when young women are unemployed. To give a specific example, in 2015 there were 500,000 new computing jobs to be filled in the United States, but fewer than 40,000 new computer science graduates. These shortages are fundamental to U.S. economic growth and global competitiveness. So the research shows that some ways to solve this challenge include sparking interest with girls in junior high, sustaining that engagement in high school, and inspiring young women to have a career in STEM after college. And we estimate that this more targeted approach, clearly focused on girls, could triple the number of women working in computing in the U.S. by 2025. Digital fluency can help close the gender gap, but we need to start early. Okay, so that's what our research shows. And the next point is about Accenture's own gender story, because at Accenture we firmly believe that gender diversity and equality are essential for a high-performing organization. And we have a sharp focus at Accenture on attracting, retaining, inspiring, and advancing women in our workplace. We were proud in 2016 that we surpassed early our 2017 goal of 40% of women new hires worldwide. In 2016, we also promoted 30% of our managing directors promoted were women. At Accenture, women account for 1/3 of our global workforce, over 145,000 people. Women make up 38% of our board of directors, 28% of our executives. And some of the ways that we've been able to surpass this 40% hiring goal 1 year early are, first of all, it starts with leadership from the top. We do have strong executive support for these initiatives. In 2016, our chairman and CEO and our chief leadership officer and our chief human resources officer all joined the Paradigm for Parity, which is a coalition of business leaders dedicated to addressing the corporate leadership gender gap. We also ran personalized and targeted outreach and partnerships in the recruiting space, such as virtual career fairs, social media campaigns targeted at women and ethnic networks, targeted university partnerships, and referral and mentoring programs, especially for women. We also engaged directly with our business units. FY16 was the first year that we put in place a specific business unit diversity hiring objectives and actions so that our leaders could take a more rigorous and focused approach to recruiting for diverse candidates. And we set and monitored monthly recruitment targets and shared tips and experiences across locations to be able to amplify what's working. We also changed some of the critical steps in our recruiting process. For example, we changed our interview process so that candidates of both genders get to know more members in our executive ranks throughout the process. And we ensured that all of our recruiters are trained in unconscious bias and attend diversity recruiter workshops. We actually analyzed and proactively redesigned the job descriptions online to eliminate male-oriented language. Going outside of our four walls on this topic of gender bias in recruiting, the Accenture Tech Labs was involved in an effort at the White House in 2016 called Hack the Pay Gap, where we prototyped AI technology aimed at addressing gender diversity and closing gender pay gaps in the freelance labor market, which is forecasted to represent 43% of the U.S. workforce by 2020. Those innovations are all about looking at the language in recruitment ads, essentially. So this brings us to our third and final point, which is about how we take this topic forward in our community investment programs. As Dolores described, Accenture's Skills to Succeed initiative is aimed at both closing skills gaps for youth today who are ready to work and also preparing the next generation to thrive in the digital economy. Accenture's 2020 Skills to Succeed goals are threefold, We aim to equip 3 million people with the skills to get a job or to build a business, and we've already equipped over 1.5 or so million people. Second, we aim to invest in the R&D to understand what it takes and what works in translating skills to sustainable jobs and businesses. And third, we commit to joining or creating cross-sector collaborations to close skills gaps that we see in the communities where we live and work around the world. And the S4YE collaboration that Dolores named is a good example of that. Many of our next generation partnerships worldwide are aimed at supporting girls and women in STEM with organizations like Girls Who Code in the US, Ladies Learning Code in Canada, and a non-Skills Succeed partner called STEMettes in the UK. We believe that in the digital world, exposing each and every student, particularly girls and minorities, to coding is just as critical as teaching reading, writing, or arithmetic. Along those lines, a quick personal story. I had a great experience just before the holidays collaborating with my 8-year-old daughter to teach her a 3rd grade class at a DC public school to code as part of the annual Hour of Code events. For the 2nd year in a row, Accenture teamed with Code.org to support the Hour of Code, which, as you may know, is a week-long grassroots movement dedicated to empowering students everywhere to learn to code. I'm very proud of the thousands of Accenture employees from 204 cities and 56 countries who volunteered over 14,000 of hours of their time to teach coding to over 100,000 students of all ages just before the holidays to start that journey to digital fluency. And at my daughter's school, it was truly priceless to see her and her friend being the tech support team to set up the laptop so that their classmates could learn to code with BB-8 from Star Wars. And I was really proud last week when she told me that she would like to be an engineer to be able to design autonomous cars to make sure that those cars have passenger brakes. We were talking about autonomous cars and Uber, but she thought it would be too scary for cars not to have a passenger brake, so she wanted to go ahead and design that. So in closing, as we think about the community investments that Accenture makes in Skills to Succeed, we also believe in walking the talk in terms of hiring women and people who are going through Skills to Succeed programs. And so in closing, let me tell you a story about a young woman who has come to Accenture as working in our Chicago offices in management consulting. We found her through Upwardly Global, which is one of our Skills to Succeed nonprofit partners that works to upskill and engage underemployed immigrants in the United States into jobs that are more fitting for their backgrounds. I'm proud to sit on the advisory group of Upwardly Global in DC, and this woman, whose name is private in case of retaliation as she is a political refugee, she was born in Iraq and got a degree in civil engineering. She was forced to flee the country as a political refugee after helping the U.S. military during the war, and she sought refuge in the UK where she received a master's degree but couldn't find a job. Then she applied for special immigrant visa to the United States, but also struggled to find a job in the U.S. And at a certain point, very frustrated, she came across Upwardly Global, where she learned how to build a resume, to prep for an interview, and to approach U.S. recruiters. In her own words, she said that this opportunity with Upwardly Global was key to her job success, and really what made a difference was patience and persistence, never losing hope and believing that somebody will eventually recognize your skills and value, just as Accenture has done for her. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. What a wonderful personal story. I'm so glad to hear that your daughter is already ready to start making some impacts in the engineering world. I also really appreciated Accenture's commitment to looking at the R&D angle to make sure that the skills that they're providing and investing in young women create sustainable jobs. And I think that goes back to Dolores' point at the beginning that 80% of the future jobs are not yet in existence. So we need to be continuously rethinking how we're investing in those skills. So thank you, Lisa. Now I'm going to turn over to Tamika from Mercedes-Benz. Tamika is the head of diversity inclusion for Mercedes-Benz USA, which is a division of Daimler AG. Tamika, I turn to you. Can you hear me?
I can. Great. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited, as the rest of the panel shared, to discuss this important topic. For the sake of time, I know we're running out of time a little bit here, and I want to make sure that the participants are able to ask some questions. So I'll try to quickly go through our slides because I think a lot has already been shared around the importance of this topic and different approaches to it. Daimler is a global organization. Mercedes-Benz is probably the kind of flagship brand that most of you know about. And as a global organization, we have a very deep commitment to being a good corporate and community citizen. Next slide, please. So why we're committed to this is not only because we think it's the right thing to do in terms of giving back to our communities and helping these young women, but we also recognize that it makes good business sense, as was mentioned earlier. The automotive industry is one that's been traditionally male-dominated, and so we know it's important for young women to see and connect with female role models who can give them advice, guidance, and inspiration. And, we're selfishly also, trying to build the skills of a pipeline of talent that can one day help fill the technical and other business roles in our company. So if you could go to the next slide, I'll just share really quickly 3 examples of programs we have in different Daimler affiliates across the world. The first is Mercedes-Benz Turk, which has a great program called Each Girl is a Star. And in addition to the educational training that we provide these young women, we also give university scholarships to those who decide to pursue a technical degree in college, in addition to internships at Mercedes-Benz Turkey or at one of its dealers or suppliers. So really trying to look at this from a multi-pronged angle in terms of training, scholarships, as well as internships. And then once the educational portion of the program is completed, the young women who come from all over Turkey are brought to Istanbul for a week to have a week-long visit of historic and cultural sites to really kind of be their capstone trip for the program. So that's just one example. We can go to the next slide, and I'll talk about here at Mercedes-Benz USA, which is based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. We are partnering with Women in Technology, or WIT as it's called. And WIT is focused on helping women and young girls who are interested in or engaged in careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM. And as it's been shared earlier, the statistics are pretty alarming. America lags behind other nations in the number of young women majoring in science and engineering at colleges and universities. So WIT Girls basically supports and inspires girls in middle and high school to break through those barriers and to pursue opportunities in STEM. So we work with them on career panels and career exploration workshops to help girls understand the kinds of jobs they could have one day with a STEM education. We also have job shadowing opportunities that expose the girls to professional women already established in their careers, so they can see firsthand what a day in the life is like for women that are pursuing these careers. For young women in college, Mercedes-Benz USA provides scholarships through the WIT Campus program, and we basically have a named scholarship that helps young women that are already pursuing a STEM major, and this is really important because it gives them that financial support that they need to graduate, because many of the girls in the program come from socially and economically disadvantaged areas, and those scholarships are really critical to help them graduate. The next slide and last slide is referencing an initiative we have with Mercedes-Benz Financial Services. They have a summer co-op program focused on information technology. Once again, IT is a traditionally male-dominated field. So the goal here is to give these young women the experience and exposure they need to thrive in the IT world. So the students actually work 32 hours a week, and they do rotations in various IT departments. A few of the work activities include designing a website, developing an iPhone app, coding in a Java programming language. And then in addition to the IT experience they get, they also learn about other areas and functions, including HR, marketing, communications, and legal. So these are just 3 examples, but they're pretty illustrative of the commitment that Daimler and Mercedes-Benz has to providing educational and economic opportunities to young women across the globe. So with that, I will wrap up and let us go to the Q&A session so that we can get the participants to chime in. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tamika. What a succinct PowerPoint. Thanks so much, and apologies for running short here, but great that we can open up to questions. So I know I actually already have a question for you. Is the program open to non-Americans?
In which program? So I would say every country kind of has their own programs that focus on their population. So for example, Mercedes-Benz in Turkey has initiatives focused on girls in Turkey. You know, here in Mercedes-Benz USA, we focus on young women that are in our geographic area. So I just gave 3 examples, but as I mentioned, we're a global organization, so we have similar initiatives all around the world that are focused on girls and young women in that geographical area.
Great. No, thank you. That's super helpful, and I can follow up bilaterally with you on the individual question. We have a question for Lisa regarding Accenture's work in the STEM area. And one question was, do you actually partner with firms in Silicon Valley?
Could you repeat that?
So the question is if Accenture, in its work around STEM research, in terms of getting women into STEM, are you also facilitating partnerships with firms in Silicon Valley to make the linkages between the research and the actual opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. We lead a program of we call it open innovation to bring in a really broad cross-sector ecosystem to address these issues. And we're very active in Silicon Valley between our practice, our consulting practice, our business, our tech labs, our open innovation team. There's a lot of energy with Accenture in Silicon Valley, and we've just launched, we're launching a new initiative on the topic of AI for good, which is really trying to connect in the latest AI technologies in the areas where it can help address some of these topics that we've been talking about, helping the next generation thrive in the job market, reskilling, and helping with the career navigation for people, women moving into jobs, etc. So short answer is yes.
Great, great. And there's some individual kind of specific questions for you, Lisa, that I can give you offline about specific countries, etc. This is a question for Ravi. Ravi, there's actually a couple questions for you. One, are you aware of a mentorship database, both to find mentors in for young women so that they can find mentors in their field of interest, but also the other way around, to find young women that are interested in particular careers?
Yes, I think in my talk I did mention the Moogle, which is one of the biggest databases of young women aspiring to become entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, and offers coaching and mentorship by other women. So I'll be very happy to connect. Please connect, and Tulsi will be connecting us, and be happy to make sure that you're part of this. We have 10,000 free opportunities that are being secured last week. So we will make sure that the most marginalized and deserving young women are able to avail that. So absolutely, we'll be happy to connect. And of course, we will be launching the physical meeting of a global coalition on young women entrepreneurs, and we invite you to join that conversation too. And do register yourself to empowerwomen.org. That is another very big database of women's economic empowerment, and they have an Empower Women Championship program to do cross-pollination and fertilization of women's lessons learned and opportunities to move forward.
Great, and I know that there's actually questions coming in about interest in the March event that you mentioned, Ravi, so we can send that in the follow-up email so that people can register.
Yeah, and just to say that, feel free, to connect on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I'm very, very happy because, like I said, we don't want this to be a seminar. We really need this to become a movement to make sure that young women benefit out of all the programs that have been created for answering this big question on youth unemployment, but also ensuring that women's employment also focuses on the 900 million young women. And I should have said the second youth revolution coming in Africa, which is another 500 million. So very excited. Thank you again to all the panelists and to you, Tulsi, for a fantastic moderation.
Thank you, Ravi. We recognize we're a little bit over time, so people that need to drop off, I completely understand. We have one more question that I'm going to direct to Dolores. Dolores, there's a question here. You mentioned the holistic approach and how it's important also to be addressing not just creating jobs, but the legal barriers, etc. Is PLAN doing anything to educate men to allow young women to take advantage of these opportunities?
Yes, the answer to that is a definite yes. There is a very substantial amount of focus in PLAN International on gender equality. It's a primary a part of our focus both internally and externally. There are programs specifically to engage boys and men in the whole effort, and if someone has a specific question, I can link them with the people in the organization that can give them more details.
Great. Great. So what I'll do, and I know there's a lot more questions coming in, but we are out of time. We will be sending a recording and the slides around to all participants, so you will have that. I will also follow up with several resources that our participants mentioned, our panelists mentioned today, as well as the March event. And if there are any specific questions to the panelists, we will definitely get back to you with those answers. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. A special huge thanks to our wonderful panelists. So enlightening and really great information shared. And I'm wishing everybody a happy day or evening or night. So thank you very much for joining.